The chamber stretched wide enough to hold a small city. Ambassador Chen Wei stood at the center of it all, a single human surrounded by thousands of alien beings. Above her head, holographic displays showed her face in perfect detail to every corner of the massive room. She looked calm. Too calm for someone about to be judged by the most powerful organization in the known galaxy. The Speaker of the Council rose from his elevated platform. He was a Vorath, tall and covered in silver scales that caught the light with every movement. His three eyes fixed on Chen as he began to read from the ancient data scroll that floated before him. Humanity of Earth, you stand accused before this council of crimes against galactic harmony, the speaker said. His voice echoed through translation devices that converted his words into 800 different languages simultaneously. You have violated the harmonious expansion doctrine by colonizing 17 systems without proper authorization. You have disrupted established trade routes with aggressive pricing practices. You have refused to limit your population growth according to standard protocols. And most concerning of all, you have spread your culture and ideas to other species with reckless abandon. Chen listened without expression. Behind her, projected for all to see, images appeared showing human colonies on distant worlds, ships moving through space at speeds that made older species uncomfortable, human traders shaking hands with aliens, their broad smiles seeming almost threatening to those who did not understand the gesture, human music playing in alien markets, human food being sold on 1,000 worlds, human ideas about freedom and individuality, spreading like wildfire among younger species. The Council has deliberated, the speaker continued. We have reviewed testimony from 412 species. We have examined the evidence of your 23 years among us, and we have reached a decision. The chamber fell silent. 847 species held their collective breath. Humanity had only joined the galactic community 2 decades ago, after finally developing faster-than-light travel. In that short time, they had caused more disruption than some species caused in 1,000 years. The vote has concluded, the speaker announced. 731 species vote for expulsion. 116 vote against. The measure passes. A wave of sound rolled through the chamber. Some species chirped in approval. Others hummed or clicked or expressed satisfaction in ways that human ears could not easily understand. A few of the younger species, those who had become friends with humanity, made sounds of distress. The speaker raised one clawed hand for silence. Ambassador Chen Wei of Earth, the Council hereby expels humanity from galactic civilization. All human embassies must close. All human trade stations must be dismantled. All human colonies in Council-controlled space must be evacuated. You have 1 solar cycle to remove your presence from our territory. Chen nodded slowly. She had expected this. The signs had been obvious for months. The older species feared change, and humanity represented nothing but change. Furthermore, the speaker said, and now his voice carried an edge of warning, humanity is forbidden from entering Council-controlled space. This includes approximately 70% of the explored galaxy. Any human ships found in our territory after the deadline will be considered hostile and dealt with accordingly. The speaker paused, his 3 eyes studying Chen carefully. Do you understand these terms? Chen Wei took a slow breath. Around her, camera drones captured every angle of her face, broadcasting this moment to trillions of beings across hundreds of worlds. She was aware that her next words would be analyzed and discussed for years to come. Some expected her to beg, others thought she might threaten. A few wondered if she would break down in tears. Instead, Chen smiled. It was not a big smile. Not a gesture of defiance or mockery. Just a small, genuine smile, the kind a person might make when receiving unexpected good news. It touched the corners of her eyes and made her look somehow younger despite the gray in her hair. We understand, she said simply. Her voice was steady and clear. We'll be gone in 30 days. A ripple of confusion spread through the chamber. The speaker's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of surprise among his people. This was not the response anyone had anticipated. You do not wish to appeal? The speaker asked. You will not ask for reconsideration? No, Chen said, and her smile widened just a fraction. You've made your decision. We respect it. We'll gather our people and leave council space as requested. Is there anything else? The speaker exchanged glances with other council members. Whispered conversations happened in a dozen languages. The Zenithar representative, a species that had profited greatly from human trade, looked almost panicked. The Zaltine delegation, one of the oldest and most conservative species, appeared satisfied. The younger species seemed confused and sad. No, the speaker finally said. "There is nothing else. You are dismissed." Chen bowed slightly, a gesture that meant respect in both human and most alien cultures. Then she turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence of the enormous chamber. Every eye followed her as she moved. Just before reaching the door, Chen paused. She looked back over her shoulder at the assembled council, at the representatives of 847 different civilizations. Her smile had not faded. "Thank you," she said, "for the opportunity, and good luck with everything." Then she was gone, the door sliding shut behind her with a soft hiss. The speaker stood frozen at his podium. Around him, council members began to talk all at once. The sound grew louder and more chaotic. Something about the humans' reaction had unsettled them all, though none could quite explain why. It was like watching someone sentenced to exile who seemed pleased about it, like punishing a child only to have them thank you for the discipline. In the human section of Nexus Prime Station, Chen's smile finally faded as she entered her private office. Her staff waited for her, their faces showing the strain of the past months. Some looked angry. Others appeared on the verge of tears. They had worked so hard to make humanity's place in the galactic community work. "So?" her assistant asked. "What happens now?" Chen moved to the window and looked out at the massive station, at the countless ships coming and going, at the galaxy spread out before her in all its glory. Somewhere out there, in the direction the council considered worthless and dangerous, lay 30% of the galaxy that no one else wanted. The dark spaces, the hazardous regions, the areas filled with ancient warnings and abandoned technology, the frontier. "Now," Chen said, and the smile returned to her face. "We go home, and then we get to work. Real work. Our work." She turned to face her staff. "Send a message to Earth. Tell them to begin Operation Exodus. Every human in council space is to return home immediately. And I mean everyone. We leave nothing behind. We take our technology, our ships, our equipment, everything. If it's not bolted down, it comes with us. And if it is bolted down, we unbolt it." "What about our colonies here?" someone asked. "Abandoned," Chen said firmly. "We take the people and anything useful. Let the council have the empty buildings." "But we spent years building those colonies," her assistant protested. Chen's expression softened slightly. "I know, but trust me. Where we're going, we won't need them. Where we're going, we can build something so much better." She looked back out at the stars, at the vast dark beyond council space. "They think they're punishing us. They think they're putting us in our place." Her smile grew wider. "They have no idea what they've just done." Outside the window, the first human ships were already beginning to move, starting their journey home. And on every vessel, on every station, in every human heart, the same message was spreading. The council had set them free. The exodus began 3 days after the council's verdict. Across 70% of the galaxy, in every system where humans had built homes, the message arrived and was received with surprising enthusiasm. "Pack up, go home. Time to leave." The galactic news networks expected chaos. They positioned their cameras at every major human colony, waiting to capture scenes of panic and desperation. They wanted footage of humans begging to stay, fighting among themselves, or pleading with local alien governments for sanctuary. The older species, those who had voted for expulsion, watched with satisfaction. The younger species, those who had voted against it, watched with pity. Instead, they all witnessed something that made no sense. The humans were efficient. On the colony world of New Brisbane, human settlers dismantled their entire settlement in 17 days. They didn't just pack their personal belongings. They took apart the fusion reactors. They removed the hydroponics bays piece by piece. They even excavated the underground water purification systems. Massive cargo ships arrived, were loaded with impossible speed, and departed on schedule. The local Wiener population, who had lived alongside the humans for 12 years, watched in confusion as their neighbors stripped the colony to its foundation and left without ceremony. "Why are you taking everything?" one Wiener merchant asked a human engineer who was supervising the removal of a manufacturing plant. "The buildings still work. The equipment still functions. Why not leave it for others to use?" The engineer, a woman named Sarah Okonkwo, didn't stop working as she answered. "Because we might need it where we're going." "Can't leave good equipment behind, but where are you going?" the Wiener pressed. "Back to Earth? Surely Earth doesn't need industrial fabricators. You have plenty already." Sarah smiled, and it was the same kind of smile Ambassador Chen had worn in the council chamber. "Not to Earth, beyond Earth, way beyond. And trust me, We'll need every fabricator we can carry. The Vinar didn't understand, but Sarah was already moving on to the next task, checking items off her digital clipboard with focused determination. The pattern repeated across human colonies. On New Shanghai, humans dismantled 3 orbital stations and packed them into cargo vessels. On Hope's Landing, they even began moving asteroids, using massive tugs to pull resource-rich rocks out of orbit and attach them to the Exodus fleet. On Terra Nova, they evacuated 2 million people in 8 days, a logistical feat that should have taken months. The Galactic media started calling it the Great Stripping because humans seemed to take everything that wasn't part of the planet itself. And some reporters swore that if humans could have taken the planets, they would have. But what disturbed observers most was the mood. These were people being exiled from civilized space. They were losing their homes, their businesses, everything they had built over 2 decades. They should have been devastated. Instead, they seemed excited. A reporter from the Zalthine Broadcasting Network managed to interview a human cargo ship captain named Marcus Chen as his vessel. The Shanghai Sunrise prepared to depart from Nexus Prime Station for the last time. "Captain Chen, how do you feel about being forced to leave?" the reporter asked, her translator device working to convey the proper tone of sympathetic concern. Marcus looked at her with bright eyes and a grin that showed too many teeth. "Forced? Lady, this is the best thing that ever happened to us." The reporter's confusion was evident even across species barriers. "I don't understand. You've been expelled from the galactic community. You're losing access to 3/4 of known space. How is this good?" Marcus laughed. "Because now we can stop playing by their rules. You know what the Council wouldn't let us do? Wouldn't let us experiment with precursor technology. Too dangerous, they said. Wouldn't let us expand faster than their approved rate. Too aggressive, they said. Wouldn't let us research certain kinds of engines or weapons or AI systems. Too risky, they said." He leaned closer to the camera. "Well, guess what? Where we're going, there's no council to tell us no. There's nothing but empty space, dead civilizations, and more opportunity than we know what to do with. They think they're punishing us, but they just gave us the keys to the candy store." "But the regions beyond council space are considered uninhabitable," the reporter said. "The radiation storms, the gravitational anomalies, the rogue defense systems left by extinct species. These areas have been forbidden zones for thousands of years." Marcus's grin widened. "Forbidden to who? Not to us anymore. We're not council species now, remember?" He patted the hull of his ship with obvious affection. "Besides, dangerous just means nobody else was brave enough or crazy enough to figure it out. Humans were both." The interview went viral across the Galactic network. Billions of beings watched it and felt a growing sense of unease. The humans weren't acting like a defeated people. They were acting like prisoners who had just been given pardon and release. On Earth, the evacuation fleet began arriving in a steady stream. Ships descended from orbit carrying not just people but entire manufacturing facilities, research equipment, and exotic materials that had been collected across dozens of worlds. The orbital space around Earth grew crowded with vessels of every size, from small personal craft to massive cargo haulers that stretched for kilometers. But the ships didn't stay long. After unloading refugees and uploading supplies, they departed again, heading for new destinations. Not back to council space, but in the opposite direction, toward the dark regions, toward the forbidden zones, toward spaces on the galactic maps that were marked with warnings in 100 dead languages. The United Earth government held a global broadcast 3 weeks after the expulsion. President Adesanya stood before cameras that transmitted her words to 40 billion humans across the solar system and throughout human space. "Citizens of Earth and her colonies," she began. 3 weeks ago, the Galactic Council expelled humanity from their organization. They intended this as punishment for our rapid expansion and cultural influence. They expected us to be grateful for the 23 years they tolerated our presence among them. She paused and a smile crossed her face. "Instead, I stand before you today to announce the beginning of humanity's greatest era of exploration and expansion. The Council controls 70% of the explored galaxy. They are welcome to it. We are taking the 30% they didn't want. The dangerous 30%, the unexplored 30%. The 30% filled with the ruins and technology of civilizations far older than any current Council species." Behind her, a holographic map appeared, showing the galaxy in 3 dimensions. The majority glowed with the soft blue light representing Council space, but the outer edges, the spaces between the spiral arms, the dark regions above and below the galactic plane, all of these were highlighted in red, There was so much red. "This is ours now," President Adesanya said. "Not by conquest. Not by negotiation. By simple fact of being the only ones willing to explore it. We have already begun settlement operations in 200 systems in these regions. Within 5 years, we project colonies on 500 worlds. Within 10 years, we will have surpassed our presence in council space by a factor of 10. She turned to look directly into the camera, and her expression was fierce with pride. The council feared our rate of expansion when we were playing by their rules. They haven't seen anything yet. To all humans in council space, come home. Your real work is about to begin. To all humans already home, prepare for the greatest adventure in our species' history. And to the Galactic Council, watching this broadcast with concern and confusion, I say this. Thank you for setting us free. The broadcast ended. Across Earth and the solar system, a cheer went up that was almost loud enough to reach space. Humanity had been given a challenge, and they were going to meet it with everything they had. In the council chambers on Nexus Prime, the speaker watched the human president's address with growing alarm. Around him, other council members were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. Why were the humans so happy? What did they know about the forbidden zones that the council didn't? And most disturbing of all, what if expelling them had been a mistake? But it was too late now. The vote had been cast. The decision was final, and humanity was already moving beyond their reach, into spaces the council had feared for millennia, with smiles on their faces and hope in their hearts. The human evacuation completed on day 29, 1 full day ahead of the deadline. The last human ship departed from council space with a simple message transmitted on all frequencies. Thank you for the opportunity. Good luck with everything. Then they were gone, leaving empty colonies and quiet spaces where once their noise and energy had filled the void. The galaxy suddenly felt larger and somehow lonelier without them. And in the darkness beyond council space, humanity got to work. 5 years passed. The galaxy moved on, or at least tried to. In the council chambers, representatives gathered as always, discussing trade disputes and border conflicts and all the usual business of galactic civilization. But there was an empty feeling to it all, like something important was missing. The humans had only been members for 23 years, but their absence left a hole larger than their short time should have created. The council had expected many things after humanity's expulsion. They expected to hear complaints and requests for reconsideration. They expected to detect human ships trying to sneak back into council space. They expected problems. What they got was silence, complete and total silence. No transmissions came from human space. No ships crossed the border. No messages. No trade requests. No diplomatic outreach of any kind. It was as if humanity had simply vanished from the galaxy entirely. Long-range scans of the Sol system showed activity, energy signatures, and ship movements, but nothing that could be clearly identified. And beyond Sol, in the dark spaces humanity had retreated to, the scans showed only strange readings that made no sense. At first, the older species were satisfied. The problem had been solved. The disruptive humans were gone. Life could return to normal. But normal wasn't the same anymore. The Zenithar Merchant Guild reported losses in the first month. By the end of the first year, they had lost 40% of their revenue. Human trading companies had been aggressive competitors, yes, but they had also created new markets and found new customers. Without them, trade routes that had been profitable for decades were now barely breaking even. The Kothari manufacturing sector collapsed within 2 years. They had specialized in mid-grade technology, selling to species who couldn't afford the premium goods from more advanced civilizations. But humans had entered that market with better products at lower prices, forcing the Kothari to innovate and improve to compete. When the humans left, the Kothari had tried to raise their prices again. Their customers simply stopped buying, having learned to expect better for less. The Vinar restaurant industry, strangely enough, suffered. Human food had become popular across hundreds of worlds. Human chefs had introduced concepts like fusion cuisine that combined elements from different cultures. Human farmers had shared crop varieties that grew in hostile conditions. When they left, they took their recipes and their seeds with them. Vinar restaurants that had specialized in human food either closed or tried to recreate the dishes from memory. It wasn't the same. Even entertainment felt the loss. Human music had spread across the galaxy with infectious speed. Human stories about exploration and adventure had inspired young beings of dozens of species. Human concepts of individual freedom and self-determination had started movements on conservative worlds. Now that creative energy was simply gone, and nothing had risen to replace it. But these economic and cultural losses, troubling as they were, weren't what kept the Council awake at night. What really worried them was the exploration data. The Council had controlled 70% of the explored galaxy for good reason. The remaining 30% was dangerous. Every species in the Council had legends about what lay in those dark spaces. Radiation storms that could fry a ship's electronics in seconds. Gravitational anomalies that could tear a vessel apart. Automated defense systems left behind by civilizations so old that their names were forgotten. And the ruins, countless ruins, of species that had risen to heights the current galaxy couldn't imagine, and then fallen. The Council had strict protocols about precursor technology. Don't touch it. Don't study it too closely. Don't try to reverse engineer it. Too dangerous. Too unpredictable. Entire species had destroyed themselves trying to use technology they didn't understand, so the dark spaces remained unexplored, marked on maps with warnings avoided by all sensible beings, all except humans apparently. The Council's Exploration Division sent probe drones into the regions near human space, trying to gather intelligence without actually crossing the boundary. The drones sent back disturbing information. They detected energy signatures that shouldn't exist, readings that suggested massive construction projects, radiation patterns that looked like fusion reactors, hundreds of them, all running simultaneously, and strangest of all, they detected ships moving between systems at speeds that seemed impossible. Faster than light travel was one thing, but the humans appeared to be traveling at rates far exceeding standard FTL capabilities. A Zalthine exploration vessel chasing pirates accidentally crossed into what had been the human border. They were immediately intercepted by a human patrol ship. The Zalthine captain, expecting an angry confrontation, was surprised by how polite the humans were. "Sorry, but Council species aren't welcome in this region," the human patrol captain said over the communication channel. "You'll need to turn back." The Zalthine captain, curious despite the awkward situation, asked, "What have you built out here?" The human captain smiled that unsettling smile they all seemed to share. "Wouldn't you like to know? But seriously, you should leave. Some of these systems have automated defenses we're still mapping. Wouldn't want you to get hurt." "Automated defenses?" the Zalthine captain said. "You mean precursor technology? That's extremely dangerous. The Council has strict protocols about such things. Good thing we're not Council species anymore," the human replied cheerfully. "Now turn around, please. We're being friendly about this, but we will escort you out if necessary." The Zalthine vessel retreated, but not before their sensors had captured detailed scans of the human patrol ship. The data was brought back to Council space and analyzed by the best scientific minds available. Their conclusions were troubling. The human ship was at least 30 years ahead of where it should be. The hull materials were more advanced. The engine signature suggested a power source that shouldn't be possible with known technology, and the weapon systems briefly activated during the encounter had energy outputs that exceeded Council military specifications by a significant margin. In 5 years, humanity had made technological leaps that should have taken generations. The Speaker of the Council called a special session. Representatives gathered with a sense of unease that hadn't been present 5 years ago. This time they weren't discussing what to do about humanity. They were discussing what humanity might have become. "We need to address the situation," the Speaker said. His silver scales had dulled with age and stress. "The humans are not behaving as we predicted. They were supposed to stagnate without access to our technology and trade networks. Instead, they appear to be thriving." A Vorath intelligence officer presented the findings. "Our data suggests the humans have established colonies on approximately 400 worlds in the Forbidden Zones. Their population has grown from 40 billion to an estimated 120 billion through advanced medical technology and aggressive expansion. They have constructed at least 7 partial Dyson spheres around stars in their territory, giving them energy resources that dwarf our most advanced civilizations." Shocked silence filled the chamber. Dyson spheres were theoretical for most species. Attempting to build one was considered a project that would take thousands of years. The humans had built 7 in 5 years? "How is this possible?" a young Venar representative asked. Those regions are supposed to be death traps. The radiation alone should kill anyone who ventures too far. The intelligence officer's expression was grim. It appears the humans have been using the forbidden zones for exactly what we feared. They've been accessing precursor technology and successfully reverse engineering it. The radiation storms, that kill most beings. Humans built shielded research stations inside them. The gravitational anomalies we avoid, humans studied them and learned to manipulate gravity in ways we don't understand. The automated defense systems, humans either destroyed them or reprogrammed them. That's insane, a Cathari elder said. Precursor technology has destroyed every species that tried to use it. The risks are enormous. Yes, the intelligence officer agreed. But apparently the humans decided the rewards were worth the risks. And from what we can tell, they've been successful more often than not. Another uncomfortable silence settled over the chamber. No one wanted to say what everyone was thinking. By expelling humanity, by pushing them into the dangerous spaces, the Council had inadvertently given them access to the greatest treasure trove of advanced technology in the galaxy. Technology the Council had been too afraid to pursue themselves. Then came the report that changed everything. An independent journalist, a Zenithar named Krell, had spent 3 years investigating the human situation. She had interviewed refugees, who had left Council space for human territory, collected leaked data from various sources, and pieced together a picture of what humanity had built beyond the boundary. Her report spread across the Galactic network like wildfire. In it, she revealed that humanity had created something called the Human Traverse, a network of artificial wormholes connecting their territory. Travel that should take months now took days. She described cities built around precursor ruins, where human scientists worked day and night to understand technologies millions of years old. She showed footage, smuggled out by unknown sources, of construction projects on a scale that made Council achievements look like. The truth arrived not with a bang but with a data leak. Someone, no one ever discovered who, released 50 terabytes of information onto the Galactic network. Technical specifications, colony reports, scientific research papers, economic data, construction blueprints. All of it came from human sources, and all of it painted a picture of what humanity had accomplished in 6 years of exile. The leak couldn't be contained. It spread through the network faster than Council security forces could shut it down. Within hours, beings across 800 civilizations were reading about what humanity had built, and what they read made their previous concerns look small. Dr. Venna Koth, a Zalthine astrophysicist, was among the first to analyze the data. She sat in her laboratory on Nexus Prime, reading through document after document, her 3 eyes growing wider with each page. Finally, she called an emergency meeting with other Council scientists. "This can't be real," said Dr. Morvan, a Vanar mathematician. "The energy calculations alone are impossible." "The calculations are correct," Venna said quietly. She displayed a holographic chart showing humanity's energy production. 7 partial Dyson swarms, each harvesting approximately 20% of their star's total output. Together, they're producing more energy than the entire Council combined. The other scientists stared at the numbers. Energy was the foundation of civilization. Everything else, population, industry, technology, military power, all depended on energy. And humanity had just surpassed 800 species combined. But that was just the beginning. The leaked documents revealed project after project that should have been impossible. Humans had built quantum communication networks that allowed instant messaging across their entire territory. They had developed nanoscale manufacturing that could build anything from raw atomic elements. They had created artificial intelligence systems sophisticated enough to manage entire planetary economies. They had even begun experiments with consciousness transfer and life extension technologies. And most shocking of all, they had accessed the precursor ruins and survived. The documents included research papers about ancient technology. Humans had explored over 200 precursor sites, ruins of civilizations that had fallen millions of years ago. The Council had always considered such sites forbidden, too dangerous to approach. The few times Council species had tried to study precursor technology, the results had been catastrophic. Entire research teams lost, ships destroyed, planets rendered uninhabitable, but humans approached the problem differently. Where Council species tried to understand everything before touching anything, humans experimented. They poked at things to see what happened. They tested theories by building prototypes. They failed often, yes, the documents included casualty reports that made Venna feel sick. But they also succeeded, and each success built on the last. The leaked data included a particularly detailed report about a precursor installation in a system humans now called New Alexandria. The installation had been protected by automated defenses that had destroyed 17 human ships before they figured out how to communicate with the ancient AI systems. 34 people died in those failed attempts, but on the 18th try they succeeded. They made contact. They learned the language of machines millions of years old, and when they finally accessed the installation's database, they found technical specifications for technologies that made current galactic civilization look primitive. They're reverse engineering everything, Venna told the assembled scientists. Faster than light communication, artificial gravity manipulation, exotic matter production, energy to matter conversion. These aren't just theories anymore. Humans are building functional prototypes. But the risks, Dr. Morvan protested. Precursor technology has driven species to extinction. The power sources can explode. The weapons can destroy stars. The nanotechnology can turn planets into gray goo. We've avoided these technologies for good reasons. Yes, Venna agreed. And while we've been safe, we've also been stagnant. Council technology hasn't meaningfully advanced in 10,000 years. We maintain what we have. We improve it incrementally. But fundamental breakthroughs? Those stopped long ago. She pulled up another document, this one showing population statistics. Humans have grown from 40 billion to 120 billion in 6 years. They've colonized 400 worlds. Their economy is expanding at 40% per year. And according to these projections, within 10 more years, they'll surpass the entire council in industrial capacity. The silence in the room was heavy with implications. The galaxy's balance of power was shifting, and the council had no idea how to respond. The political fractures came quickly after that. The council had always maintained unity through careful consensus building and respect for tradition. But the human situation created divisions that couldn't be papered over. The older species, those who had voted for expulsion, insisted they had made the right choice. Humans are reckless, declared High Chancellor Zeth of the Zalthine. They're playing with forces they don't understand. Yes, they've achieved results, but at what cost? How many have died in their experiments? How many more will die when they finally make a mistake too big to recover from? The younger species, many of whom had opposed expulsion, saw things differently. While humans take risks and advance, we sit in our comfortable stations and decay, argued Representative Senna of the Vinar. Yes, their methods are dangerous, but they're alive. They're growing. They're building. What are we doing? Following rules written by species that died before some of us evolved. The economic faction, led by the Zenithar Merchant Guild, had their own concerns. We're bleeding trade revenue, Guildmaster Trevok announced. 17% of our shipping routes are no longer profitable. 23% of our manufacturing partners have closed. And why? Because humans disrupted our markets, and when they left, they took that disruption with them. We didn't return to stability. We returned to stagnation. Meanwhile, outside the council's knowledge, something else was happening. Emigration. It started small. A few scientists who wanted to study precursor technology without council restrictions. Some entrepreneurs looking for markets with less regulation. Young beings seeking adventure and opportunity. They found ways to make contact with human space, applied for visas, and crossed the border. Then it became a stream. Hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of beings from council species left civilized space for human territory. The council tried to stop it with laws and regulations, but it was like trying to stop water with a net. People found ways. A Kothari engineer named Drevex was interviewed after he emigrated. I spent 15 years trying to get approval for a new engine design in council space, he said. 15 years of committee meetings and safety reviews and impact assessments. I got to human space, presented my idea to a human company, and they said, let's build a prototype. 3 months later, we had a working model. 3 months! That's the difference. Humans don't ask if something is safe first. They ask if it's worth trying. The council watched this exodus with growing alarm. They were losing their best and brightest, the very beings who might have led their own civilization to advancement. But those beings were choosing humanity instead. Then came the analysis that changed everything. A team of council economists, led by a Zenithar named Krell, the same journalist who had broken the early stories, published a comprehensive study of the human economic system. Her findings were presented to the full council in a closed session. Humanity has created what they call a post-scarcity economy in their core systems, Krell explained. Energy is so abundant it's essentially free. Manufacturing is so advanced they can produce almost anything on demand. Food production has been automated to the point where hunger doesn't exist. They're not trading in goods anymore. They're trading in ideas, art, and experiences. That's impossible, said a Vorath economist. Scarcity is the foundation of economics. Without scarcity, there's no trade. Did exactly, Krell said. They've moved beyond traditional economics. And that's why our markets can't compete with theirs. When they were part of the council, they were still playing by our rules. Now, they're playing a completely different game. She displayed projections. At their current rate of growth, human economic output will exceed the entire council within 15 years. Their technology will surpass ours within 20. And their population will be larger than our 10 biggest civilizations combined within 30 years. The Speaker of the Council, who had aged visibly in the 6 years since expulsion, stood to address the assembly. We need to discuss our options. It's clear now that our assumptions were wrong. Humanity did not collapse without us. They thrived, and now they represent a power that we don't control and don't understand. Water-O. Ambassador Krell's ship crossed into human space 7 years after the expulsion. She had sent messages ahead, requesting permission to visit Seoul and meet with human leadership. The response had been polite but brief. Permission granted, welcome. What happened next surprised her entire delegation. A human escort vessel appeared within minutes of crossing the boundary. But this wasn't the patrol ship she had read about in reports. This was something entirely different. The ship was beautiful in a way that made no practical sense. Its hull seemed to shift colors like oil on water, and its shape was organic, flowing, more like a living thing than a machine. And it was fast. Sensors showed it had crossed 3 light years in the time it took Krell's ship to send a greeting. Ambassador Krell, the human captain said over communication channels, welcome to the human traverse. We'll escort you to Seoul. The journey should take about 4 hours. 4 hours. Krell checked her navigation charts. Seoul was 12 light years from the border. Even with the best Council FTL drives, that journey should take 3 days. She said nothing, but her scales shifted color with agitation. 4 hours. They entered what the humans called a traverse gate, a ring of exotic matter floating in space that shouldn't exist according to everything Krell knew about physics. The gate activated. Reality twisted in ways her sensors couldn't properly measure, and suddenly they were emerging from another gate in a completely different system. Welcome to the New Alexandria corridor, the escort captain said cheerfully. We'll make 2 more jumps before reaching Seoul. Feel free to enjoy the view. Krell looked out her viewports and tried to understand what she was seeing. The star here was surrounded by a partial Dyson swarm, thousands of mirrors and collectors drinking in solar energy. But that wasn't what made her scales shift. It was the planet below, or rather what humans had done to the planet. The world had been terraformed, but not in any way Council species would recognize. The continents glowed with city lights, yes, but between the cities were vast green spaces, forests and fields that looked wild and natural, and orbiting the planet were structures that made no sense. Rings and spheres and shapes that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Is that a precursor installation? One of her aides asked, pointing to a massive crystalline structure floating in high orbit. It was, the human escort captain said. We've repurposed it. It's now a university. About 2 million students study there. From 40 different species, in human space. Krell filed that information away for later. They jumped again and again. Each system they passed through showed signs of massive development. Dyson swarms and orbital habitats and planets being transformed. And everywhere, ships moving at impossible speeds through the Traverse network. Finally, they arrived at Seoul. Krell had seen images of humanity's home system, but they were 7 years old. What she saw now was almost unrecognizable. Earth itself hadn't changed much, still blue and green and beautiful. But the space around it had been transformed into something approaching art. Orbital habitats formed a ring around the planet, each one home to millions. The moon had been colonized so extensively that lights covered its surface. Mars glowed red, but with growing patches of green where terraforming had begun to take hold. And throughout the system, thousands of ships moved in carefully choreographed patterns, like a dance performed across billions of kilometers. Seoul Station will receive you, the escort captain said. Ambassador Chen is waiting. Seoul Station hung in space between Earth and Mars, a structure so large it had its own gravity. Krell's ship docked carefully, and she emerged to find a human delegation waiting. At its head was Ambassador Chen Wei, older now, her hair entirely gray. but with those same sharp eyes and that same slight smile. Ambassador Krell, Chen said, extending her hand in the human gesture of greeting. It's been a long time. 7 years, I think. Krell took the hand carefully, remembering the gesture from before. 7 years since the Council expelled your species, yes. Chen's smile widened just slightly. 7 of the best years in human history. Come, let's talk. They walked through corridors that Krell's engineering-trained mind struggled to understand. The materials were wrong, too light for their apparent strength. The lights had no visible source, and the artificial gravity felt more natural than any Krell had experienced on Council stations. Chen led them to a conference room with a transparent wall showing Earth in all its glory. The planet hung in the view like a blue jewel, peaceful and eternal. Why are you here, Ambassador Krell? Chen asked once they were seated. The Council made its position clear 7 years ago. Krell's scales shifted, showing her discomfort. But she had not become a successful journalist by avoiding difficult truths. The Council is concerned. Your rate of advancement has exceeded all predictions. Your economic growth threatens to destabilize galactic markets, and your willingness to work with precursor technology suggests risks that the Council considers dangerous. Concerned, Chen repeated. That's an interesting word. Not impressed or curious, concerned. Can you blame us? Krell said. You've grown from 40 billion beings to over 120 billion in 7 years. You've colonized 400 worlds in regions we consider uninhabitable. You've built structures that shouldn't be possible, and developed technologies that exceed Council capabilities by decades. And you've done all this while completely ignoring every safety protocol and restriction that the Council spent millennia developing. Chen nodded slowly. All true, and we want to understand your intentions. Are you building an empire? Are you preparing for war? What do you want? Chen laughed, and it was a genuine sound, free of mockery. What do we want? Ambassador, we want exactly what we've always wanted. To grow, to explore, to build, to learn, to push boundaries and see what's possible. The Council tried to stop us from doing those things, so we left the Council. It's really that simple. But the risks, Krell pressed. Precursor technology has destroyed civilizations. The Council knows this. Why do you think we've avoided it for so long? Chen stood and walked to the transparent wall, looking down at Earth. Let me tell you a story, Ambassador. When humans first started exploring our own planet, we encountered many dangers. Storms that could sink ships, diseases that could kill entire expeditions, animals that saw us as prey, mountain ranges that claimed lives with cold and thin air, oceans so deep and dark we couldn't imagine what lived in them. She turned back to Krell. We could have stayed in our safe valleys and avoided all those dangers. Some humans argued for exactly that, but others looked at those dangers and said, let's figure it out. They built better ships. They developed medicines. They learned to coexist with dangerous animals or avoid them. They climbed the mountains because they were there. They explored the oceans because we're curious. That's very poetic, Krell said, but this is different. You're not exploring mountains. You're playing with technology that could destroy solar systems. Yes, Chen agreed, and we've lost people learning how to do it safely. 2,347 people, to be exact, have died in accidents related to precursor technology research over the last 7 years. Each death is a tragedy. Each one is remembered. She pulled up a holographic display showing names, thousands of them, scrolling slowly. These people died pushing humanity forward. But you want to know something? We asked them, before they took those risks. We told them the dangers, and they chose to take the risks anyway because they believed the potential rewards were worth it. We don't force anyone to work on dangerous projects, but we also don't stop people who want to try. Krell looked at the names scrolling past. The Council would never accept such losses. I know, Chen said quietly, and that's why the Council will never advance the way we have. You've chosen safety over progress. That's not a criticism, just an observation. Different species have different values. So what happens now? Krell asked. You continue to advance while the Council stagnates? You become so powerful that you can ignore us completely? Chen sat back down, her expression serious. We're not your enemy, Ambassador. We never were. The Council saw our differences as threats. We saw them as just differences. Yes, we're advancing faster than you. Yes, we're taking risks you wouldn't take. But we're not building weapons to use against you. We're not planning invasions. We're just doing what humans do, building, exploring, learning. She leaned forward. But if you're worried about power dynamics, let me make something clear. We don't need the Council anymore. We don't need your trade networks or your technology or your permission to expand. We have everything we need right here, in the spaces you were too afraid to explore. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Krell felt her scales shift through several colors before settling on a pale blue that indicated deep thought. Chen had just stated what everyone already knew, but no one had said out loud. The balance of power had shifted completely. "The council sent me here to negotiate," Krell said finally, "to see if some kind of relationship could be rebuilt between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. But I'm beginning to think we're not negotiating as equals anymore, are we?"